Cool. I am getting the word that we are live. So let people join here on Facebook Live. Just want to say hello to everyone joining us and thank you for joining today's TuneCore Live session. Today we're going to be getting into everything you wanted to know about Spotify. It's no secret that Spotify is one of the leading streaming platforms for really artists of all genres, and they've been consistently, rolling out new features that allow artists to promote their releases, sell tickets and merch, raise money for important causes, create visuals, pitch to playlists, and we really have yet to see the end of the feature rollout for Spotify. TuneCore and Spotify as well have been partners for years now, and we're really psyched to grow with them and to be able to watch them grow as well. So today our panel is going to include David Ecker, who is the independent label relations at Spotify, Daniel Iammatteo, artist and partner relations at TuneCore, and TuneCore artist Charlotte Sands, whose latest single Dress was just included on several Spotify playlists, including the Fresh Finds Best Pop of 2020. So congratulations to Charlotte on that. And thank you guys all for joining us on this lovely Friday in December. We're stoked to get into it, and since Spotify is the subject, I guess why not start with David? David, for an artist who has just press distribute, just sent their music via TuneCore to all the stores, and they're just waiting for their music's arrival on Spotify, what are some of the first key steps that they can take on the platform itself?
Definitely. I mean, so I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that even before you hit submit and distribute, I mean, there are all of the standard things that have always kind of been best practices for artists in terms of, making sure you have assets, making sure you have a rollout plan, all of that stuff. I would say, as easy as it is to distribute your music to Spotify right now, I would encourage artists not to overlook the steps because they really do go a long way. But I would say once you have hit the button and once you have distributed your music on Spotify, you want to make sure that you get your artist page, looking good. You want to make sure that you have a nice banner image, a thumbnail. You want to have a good bio, some photos, maybe even work on some artist playlists to highlight your influences. You want to create a good landing page, a good experience for when folks arrive on Spotify. And then, I would also say that equally important is that prep work and making sure that, even if it seems spontaneous, even if you are putting out content piecemeal, putting out music, after track, having that sense of a strategy and having that sense of, here's what I'm rolling out. Here's how I want to roll it out. Here are the assets I need to do so is super important.
I think that really speaks to what we talk about all the time here at TuneCore, which is, obviously one of the biggest benefits of being independent is that you are in control. You can release your music, whatever content you want, whenever you want. And there's a absolutely beautiful freedom to that. But with that freedom also comes, sort of just being on top of lead time, being on top of having your creative assets and having everything you need ready to go. And nowadays, Spotify really does make it easy for you to do that and actually roll into it very prepared. But, we're talking about artists sort of getting started with that sort of thing. I do want to switch to Charlotte and ask her, as an artist, when you were, what were your initial questions or sort of like gray areas about Spotify as you sort of got ready to distribute your first release independently with TuneCore?
Honestly, I think that my first releases, my questions and concerns were always just the fear of almost getting lost in this abyss of releases. Everyone's fear is to release something and then it get no response. And I think that's a genuine fear and it's completely understood. But I think it's also really important to not dwell on initial releases. I think that a lot of people, and I know for myself, I spent a lot of time worrying about that first song. And I think it's really important to just have consistent content to give listeners to cling to. And it's not just about the first thing, and it's not your first step into this release world, to keep it going and build momentum. And it takes a lot of time, but yeah, all my questions were basically based off of like how to get people to interact with it and how to boost the algorithm and those kind of things, and all these words that were so scary and confusing to me at the time. And so it was all like this random, like this business side of like the creative thing that I didn't understand. And so most of them have now gone away based off of like learning about it. But for the beginning, it was definitely like this scary like first step of what happens now? What if nobody listens? What if nobody puts it on a playlist, you know? So I would also just say to don't dwell on those initial things. And like he said, take time building your artist pages. And I think that's really important, and get like the whole entire brand set. And that's just like one initial step. It's not your entire identity. So do not like be so nervous about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I'm not an artist myself, but I know just after years of working here, there's just obviously an apprehension around releasing music for the first time anyway. You know, you might have been doing it elsewhere on different platforms for free before you actually started using TuneCore, but that first project, you know, whatever it is, it's perfectly normal to sort of have those butterflies and those fears. But to your point, you know, preparation and not, you know, putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, definitely is really, you know, great advice. And as, you know, sort of, I guess, you know, unique to your experience, I want to switch this over to Dan, who, by the way, if he wasn't on camera when I was watching him, that's my bad. Sorry. I may have come out as a presenter. So this is Daniel Iammatteo. Dan, in your experience helping TuneCore artists over the years, you know, what are, in your opinion, you know, some of the biggest misconceptions about Spotify, just in terms of getting their music in front of listeners there once it's actually there?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Charlotte was exactly, she said it so well. And I get this from a lot of artists. It's like they put a lot of pressure. It's tempting to do this. You've put so much work into making a song or a release, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself to make it this really big thing when it comes to getting on playlists and making sure everyone you've never even met before listens to the song. But it is a gradual build. It's a slow build. It's something that you can build over time. And you know, being thoughtful about how you release, when you release, and how often you release really plays into these factors. So I'd say, like, when it comes to misconceptions, people think that if I get on a Spotify playlist, it's going to change my life. But the reality is, you're an artist because you want to connect with people. That's your job as an artist, is connection. And getting on a Spotify playlist, while it's an amazing accomplishment, might not really help you do that. So your goal every time that you put out new music is, how can I reach more people who are going to get at something from this? How can I like get more people to find me so that I can connect with them and help them through my art? So I'd say when it comes to Spotify, keep that in mind, and don't put so much pressure on your release when it comes to getting on playlists and making sure that, you know, everybody listens.
For sure. Good advice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, jump in, David, please.
No, I was just gonna say I would definitely add that you don't want to underthink certain things, and you don't want to overthink certain things. I think you don't want to underthink kind of your preparation, your asset rollouts, you know, your release schedule, all of that. But you also don't want to overthink the things that you can't really control. I think you know, how will it be received is something that, you know, no matter how much prep work you do, you can never 100% control. I think that, you know, making sure that you're submitting via the Spotify for Artists editorial pitch tool is the best thing you can do when you're starting out to get on a playlist. I believe we have 72,000 artists that have been placed on playlists for the first time ever since the tool launched. So, you know, I think that so many people are thinking, well, who's that one person at Spotify that I can talk to that will get me on all of the playlists? And I think that's overthinking it somewhat. I think that the tool is the best way to get on playlists. The editors spend literally all day listening to submissions from that tool, and you know, they listen to a lot of music, and it's met with a pretty good success rate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess on that note, David, if you like, you know, give us like a super quick history of just like the playlist on Spotify, because I've been, you know, using Spotify as a fan for, you know, close to a decade now. And really, between working in the industry and just being a fan and seeing the sort of evolution of the playlist as we know it, how has Spotify sort of optimized the way that these editors you're speaking of can actually help fans discover their music? So staying on topic, of course, we know that it's not the end all be all, but if we can just get a little breakdown.
Definitely. So, when Spotify launched, it was essentially a search bar and a music library. And I think people forget because, it's playlists have been so important for so long that I think people forget that it's a relatively recent phenomenon, even within Spotify's history. We acquired a company called TuneCore years back, and that was the basis and the initial foundation of our editorial team. These were curators that were previously independent that were now curating Spotify playlists, and that team grew over the years and really just provided more and more opportunities for discovery for artists. And I think to Spotify's credit and to leadership's credit at the time, they really realized how powerful a tool for discovery this was.
Yeah.
And that was always the goal. It was always to facilitate the most discovery possible without being a gatekeeper. And that was something that really, I think, in comparison to some of our competition, I think one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is that our editors are independent. They don't get pressured by other teams internally. They make decisions based on not only their editorial judgment, but also based on how they think it will respond with the fans, and based on how things are actually performing on platforms. So it really started out as a purely discovery driven tool, and has kind of taken on a life of its own in terms of how it's viewed, externally.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think anyone who uses Spotify, can attest to the discoverability factor there. And I mean, I know I've definitely discovered new and old a lot of my current favorite artists there. So guilty as charged there. Staying on the playlist topic, Charlotte, I know at the top of the hour we announced that you had just landed on a pretty prominent one with your most recent Signal dress. But tell us about your experience in general, just with that kind of playlist placement. How did they impact your monthly listenership? What steps did you take to sort of keep the buzz going and retain these new fans?
Yeah, it's super exciting. It's been crazy. So thank you, Spotify. But also, I think that every time we've gotten playlisting, and especially larger playlisting, it's like directly affected listeners and streams. I think that the coolest thing is watching how those streams affect like the transfer over to other songs, and kind of making sure they don't stay on that one song just because it's playlisted. That's what's been super interesting to us, is watching it actually grow in other streams on other songs, and it actually transferring to the rest of the project, because that's everyone's goal, is to make a fan of the catalog and not just of the song, So it's been really beneficial. I think our priority has always been, and my priority has always been, to kind of be prepared for when those things, if it goes well, and also if it doesn't go well, or if you don't get the support or playlisting that you expect or hope for, that to either like have new things planned and prepared to release. I think that's been really important and really beneficial for us, is to kind of be prepared that if we have those listeners and we have their attention for a second, to make sure that we have new content to give them, and we're not just asking them to become a fan, and that we won't have music for 6 months. And so that's been kind of my priority, is to get excited about it and be really stoked for that song in that moment, but to also hold their attention as much as possible, and do that by having content or new songs like consistently coming out, so that they have somewhere to like go and to support,
Yeah, it's kind of same as it ever was for artists, right? Like, go into a project, sort of expecting whatever. But when you do get that success, it's about not chilling out and resting on the world. I mean, it's like you got to pound, got to capitalize. So I think that's really good advice, sort of balancing that out. And Dan, I'll kick it to you because you wrote a great piece on the TuneCore blog about utilizing Spotify for Artists, which, by the way, if any artists out there are watching who are signed up with TuneCore or are getting ready to distribute releases, if you haven't signed up for your Spotify for Artists profile, you can do so. There's an integration within TuneCore, so you can do that and get verified quickly. And we'll make sure to cover that in the recap. But as it pertains to playlist pitching, as David put it, the Spotify for Artists editorial tool is really the way to do it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you can make it work as a TuneCore artist? From the moment that they hit send on distribute.
Sure. So I'd say the way that this works, if you're unfamiliar, is you upload your music to TuneCore, we deliver it to Spotify, and then it goes through ingestion on the Spotify side. And in that process, it'll link to your Spotify for Artists account. And when that happens, you'll see the upcoming release in that dashboard. Then you can see that upcoming release as long as it's never been released before. That's a big caveat. You can submit it through the Spotify pitch tool. And this is something that I recommend to everyone. You wouldn't imagine how much content that we're distributing that people just don't take this step to do. And it's really important step to take because, as David said, the editors at Spotify are listening to submissions through this tool. If you don't submit your music, I don't know how you'd expect them to listen to it ahead of time. So I would recommend that you should give yourself at least 3 to 4 weeks to get this done because this all takes a little bit of time. It's not instantaneous. You don't just upload to TuneCore, then it gets to Spotify for Artists within an hour, and then you're ready to pitch. It takes a couple days. So the more time you build into your schedule, the better. From there, you get to actually craft your pitch. And from a DIY point of view, you can think of this as something like Submit Hub or another platform where you get to submit to editors. You're in control of the narrative. So you get to tag your music, you get to make sure that everything looks accurate, and you get a little box and you get to tell your story exactly how you want to. I would say just focus on that, get it in on time. And then make sure you're telling a story that you want to say. Like, why did you write this music? What's special about it? What inspired you to write this music? I would focus on that. I don't think that, when you think of editors, you think of music lovers and you think of potential fans. And how would you talk to them? It's not necessarily the same as if you're going to write a press release. But when it comes to writing that, you're going to want to cater it to who's going to actually see this pitch.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else in music too, right? You are trying to get heard, but you really have to get into you have an opportunity to be authentic and really make your case or control the narrative, as you put it. I like that. I do want to stay on playlists because I know that they are, a big time sort of area of interest for TuneCore artists. And David, I wanted to kick this one back to you. We can kind of go around the horn a little bit here, but in terms of, this level of interest in playlist placement, how else do you feel that artists can prepare for success or sort of cast a wider net so they're not putting all their eggs in that one basket of playlists should they not land on one? In what other ways can Spotify be utilized?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are two things there. I think, to Charlotte's point, playlists, yes, are the fastest way to get exposed to the most people on Spotify, but that's kind of where the impact can stop for a lot of artists, right? You get exposed, but then what do you do, right? How do you maintain people's interest? How do you make sure that people are actually making that transition from hearing you casually on a playlist to actually becoming a fan? That wants to really dig in and learn more about you as an artist and listen to the rest of your catalog and stay tuned for future releases. I think one way that kind of we enable that transition is via the follow button. The follow button actually, if you can get people to follow you on Spotify, that impacts quite a lot of our personalized programming. So it impacts things like Discover Weekly and Release Radar. Radio. It really is a powerful way of making sure that it's a very sticky action that people rarely undo. People rarely unfollow someone on Spotify. I can't think of the last time, I've done that.
Me neither.
Yeah, and it's something that will forever impact people's, Discover Weeklies and release radars and all those. So that's one way. I mean, I think in terms of not putting all of your eggs in that basket, I think that just keeping that fact in mind, making sure that you are building that infrastructure around whether you make it on a playlist your first go or not, right? Building that infrastructure around the playlist, making sure that you are building a real connection between yourself and your fans. That on platform can be facilitated by the follow button. It can be facilitated by kind of contextual tools like making playlists, your biography. It can also be facilitated by this kind of new tool, which I think is really powerful, which is called Shows with Music. And that's essentially, if you deliver a podcast via Anchor, you can actually mix music with your podcast and create a show where you alternate music and talk content. And that's a really powerful way to build context around yourself as an artist, to tell people what you're about. So I think that it really is about building out that context, making people feel connected with you as an artist, so that when that playlist ad goes away, because playlists are updated all the time, a lot of playlists are kind of mood-based playlists that don't update very frequently, but then a lot of them are new releases playlists which out every week. So if you're putting all your eggs in that basket, it's just not a very diversified portfolio, right? You want to make sure that you have all of those other things firing at the same time, so that when that playlist inevitably does go away, you've made those connections with the fans.
For sure. A lot of great insight there. But I guess again, kind of kicking it back to Charlotte from the artist perspective, I'm sure even just in your peer group or other artists you talk to, you understand that element of sort of living or dying by the potential playlist placement. As an artist, building on what David said, where else do you feel some of these artists could be devoting their energy?
I mean, my first advice would be to make a lot of music and good music. I think that should be our priority always. And I think that I never really realized how important that was until I got like my first playlisting and I got super excited, and then I had nothing else prepared. And so we had this moment of being like, oh, cool, but like these are monthly listeners and I won't be able to have enough time to release anything for 2 months. So it was kind of this whole thing where I'm like, what is the point of that? You know what I mean? So unless you, for a lot of reasons, again, with like prepared content, and I think the more music you write and the better it is, just to continue having it ready to go and continue giving yourself a lot of preparation time to release those, so that they can also benefit themselves. Because that's the other thing with playlisting is like, if you don't get any support or any attention for 6 months, but you're consistently releasing music, if one of your songs does in the future, even a year down the road, it's only going to trickle back to those songs and it's only going to benefit the rest of your catalog. So for me, I'm still seeing that on songs I released 2 years ago that are still rising in streams just based off the fact that people are getting pulled from these like major playlists. And so for me, I mean, the attention should always be, I think, on the quality of the content, and also the quality of the cover art and the visual aspect of it is really important. I think to take time and to create something that is visually appealing. And it's also, if you are on a playlist, people will see that and be like, what is that? And that's another reason for them to click on your song or to get drawn into your artistry by the cover art. And so that's always a priority of mine as well, is like make sure that it's all cohesive and it's not just about that one thing, but if that one thing does happen, you want to make sure you are prepared and that it's not just like this moment where you're excited and then, it all can go away quickly. And just the rest of it, having like the profiles updated and putting a lot of time and effort into making sure those look cohesive with your brand and with your project, so people know who you are based off of that.
Yeah, I mean, you can really treat it like it's like just a different social channel. I mean, artists obsess over their social channels, and rightfully so. You know, it's presentation. It's a space for you to be you. You know, we are at the point where Spotify has essentially allowed you to do the same. And I hope everyone was listening when they heard Charlotte mention cover art, cover art, cover art, cover art.
Yeah.
I know Dan Iammatteo can relate. You know, it is cover art super important. Often forgot about it until the last minute, and there are a lot of, you know, just little requirements around it for distribution. So I definitely want to drive that one home. And I did want to bring up one last thing. It'll probably be the last thing about playlists. But you know, we here and there sort of talked about private, you know, third-party playlists, the ones, you know, that are created by just regular old users, or maybe a blog, or, you know, maybe a label. I wanted to just go around the room real quick and ask just sort of everyone's thoughts, you know, their general thoughts on third-party playlists, and how much you know, energy artists should be allocating toward this sector when they start out. I maybe start off with Daniel.
Yeah, well, before I do, I wanted to comment on what Charlotte was saying, because I think this is something important everyone should really take note about. Is think of your music, right? You get added to a playlist or whatever, but think of the journey of a consumer on Spotify. They find your song on a playlist. They think your artist name is cool, so maybe they check out your profile, or they think the artwork is awesome, so they go to your profile. Then what do? They're on your profile, they're going to listen to more of your music. If they like more of your music, they're going to like it, add it to their library, they're going to engage with you, they're going to check out your playlists. That's the journey that people go to Spotify because they love music and they want to find new cool artists that they're going to love. So think of it that way. It's a chain of reactions, and the higher quality of the art that you do, you put yourself in a position to just increase your odds of those chain of reaction, the chain of events working in your favor. So I just like to think of it from a holistic point of view. Like, you have the artist like creating everything, but from a user side as well, that's how it plays out. You know, that's how people find your discography. That's how they listen to your older materials. They go to your artist page and they click on it and they check it out. So, you know, the higher quality stuff that you do, you're putting yourself in a place to win. And then now back to your question, Kevin.
No, but I mean, that's
Yeah.
really great. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's become second nature for listeners on Spotify to do exactly what you just talked about. And again, guilty as charged. But sorry.
Yeah, it's very simple, but the more often every new user or every new audience member you find, they're going to be finding your music for the first time. So even if it's an old song that you put out 3 years ago, it could be new to someone new who's never heard it before. So just remember that. But when it comes to third-party playlisting, I'd say, you know, take this with a grain of salt. It can be really helpful, but these can be elusive. You can be, you know, approached by very expensive companies to pitch you to these third-party playlisters. Some of them might not be legit. So I just say be skeptical of that. I would say never put that first. You should always be putting, you know, the quality of your work and then the authenticity behind it and organic marketing behind it first. But it can be a part of the promotional plan. But I would say, you know, take it in stride.
Sure. And Charlotte, have you had experience with, you know, just, you know, building a base through placement on other, you know, unofficial playlists?
Yeah, I feel kind of the same exact way. It's almost like, I think it's benefited me in some ways sometimes, but not enough where I would say it was a necessity. I would say that if you have the funds or you have the resources to do that and you want to, then I think it can be helpful, but I wouldn't say it's like a make or break for, at least it hasn't been for me, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think I've heard, you know, both sides of that story where, yeah, it's probably not going to break you, but, you know, if you are able to engage with the third-party creators, then, you know, so be it. David, do you have any thoughts? I mean, I know it's sort of unofficial, so.
No, I mean, you know, one of the great things about Spotify is the fact that we can all make playlists, and the fact that many brands and labels and you know, editorial bodies make playlists is really cool. And I think that, you know, when you are on one of those and it leads to meaningful traffic, that's also really cool, right? I think the thing to be careful of is as Dan said, there are a lot of companies out there that, I mean, some are just plain scam artists. Some are just charging you an arm and a leg, telling you to follow a playlist. You get put on the playlist, and all the followers of that playlist are people that did the exact same thing, right? And you see that high number, but nobody's actually going and listening to the playlist. I think the kind of darker side of that is people that are just manipulating streams, using bots, having fake streams, all of that. That's where it gets really dangerous, and that's where you should never pay anybody ever who says they will put you on a playlist, right? I know there are different.
Say it again for the people in the back. Never ever pay to be on a playlist.
Never pay to be on a playlist. If someone claims that you're paying them to get on a Spotify official playlist, that's not true. There is no way to pay us. Editors are the most ethical people in many ways that I've ever met. If someone's saying pay me, guaranteed placement on this playlist, that is not true, or they are doing something shady that's going to result in music getting taken down from the platform. Because what happens when streams are manipulated, when there are bots, when there's fraudulent streaming, that just messes with everything, and we take that very seriously. And it's very hard to get music back up once it's been taken down for that reason, and we hate to see it happen. I think there are obviously a lot of legitimate third-party playlists, people that love music, that are curating playlists that might correspond with a brand, or maybe a publication or a video series or something. There are, I know, lots of services where there's services that facilitate getting music to all of these curators. That's different. Never pay anybody directly who says I will put you on this playlist, because best case scenario, they're scamming you and you're going to waste your hard-earned money. Worst case scenario, your music could get taken off of Spotify.
Absolutely. We talk about it on the TuneCore blog. We talk about it in FAQs. Streaming fraud is a thing, and you might not know you're committing it, but you might get mixed up with the wrong people. Unfortunately, that doesn't absolve you of guilt, and you don't want to get taken down. And I just wanted to say also, to David's point, it really is it's a new age PR in the sense that you are paying someone up front, like a playlisting pitching service, of which there are plenty of legitimate ones, but you're not guaranteed results. So anyone guaranteeing results is probably taking you for a ride. But I did want to stick with David and sort of shift gears here. I couldn't think of that expression for some reason. But I want to talk a little bit more about the analytics and data. So speaking, specifically of Spotify for Artists and what TuneCore artists who use it have at their disposal. Can you tell us a little bit about the key analytics and data offerings that on the artist side that they should know about, how they can utilize them in other areas of their career?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I would say first off, the one kind of piece of advice I would give is don't obsess over it day after day. I think I think you can be very susceptible to noticing graphs going like this. I think that looking at trends is a lot more important. I'm not going to delve into everything because there's just so much data that's available on Spotify for Artists. You can dissect, by a song level, by an album level. You can look at territories and different time frames and different ways of streaming and all of that. The one kind of stat or the one section of Spotify for Artists that I would always guarantee you kind of keep an eye on is the kind of where people discover your tracks, the organic versus playlisted streams. And I think you'll always notice when you first get on a big playlist that the bar graph or the bar on the graph that says, discovered on a Spotify playlist will be really tall, and it'll be really small for, people discovering on their playlists or on their personal playlists, in their libraries, on your artist page. The goal, I would say, of any artist when they do get that massive exposure is to always start to level those bars out. You always want to make sure that if you find that you're consistently with every release, and again, if it's a huge playlist, that bar is always going to be a little bit taller than the others. But if you're finding that like 90% of your streams or more are consistently coming from Spotify playlists, and that those other bars on the bar graph are never getting any taller, then that's kind of a time to, I would step back and rethink your strategy a little bit. Okay, how am I transitioning these fans to more organic kind of invested fans rather than casual listeners who happen to hear my song on a playlist. That's number one. I'd say the other data that's super interesting is location data, countries that people are streaming you in, cities that people are streaming you in. I think it's definitely, tangibly usable, in terms of a lot of artists, have been using that to route tours and things. Can't wait until we can get back to shows. I'm really jealous of our friends in Australia and New Zealand right now. But I think that, that's definitely one solid use case for that data. The one caveat that I would make is just, keep in mind that is not, that takes into account the fact that, or rather doesn't take into account the fact that certain markets have a bigger Spotify presence than others, and just are bigger music markets than others. So, if you constantly see one territory as, your top performing city or country, don't automatically assume that that's where you should, put all your eggs into that basket and go tour that country. But kind of in aggregate, that data is helpful when it comes to routing tours, targeting off-platform marketing, social media marketing, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I mean, you have the opportunity to really look at the global reach. And you touched on a couple of things there that I think are very interesting at this point in the conversation, because obviously you have a set of data on the Spotify side, and you also, as a TuneCore artist, you have your dashboard where you are offered, some pretty solid analytics. Maybe I'm speaking with a bias, but I wanted to kick it to Dan and just ask, because David also mentioned, at a certain point of exposure, and I had a question for Dan that sort of asks him, what data sets or analytics, conversely, do you feel that artists should be focusing on, both between TuneCore and Spotify at different points in their careers? For instance, from the first release they send to when the artist has actually begun to build a little bit of a following on the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say you should be keeping an eye on the follower count, like David alluded to earlier. That's not a vanity metric like Instagram followers at all. It directly plays into the algorithms that Spotify has to create algorithmic playlists. I know we were talking about fake streams, and it could be easy to think algorithmic robot, that stream must be, it must mean less. But an algorithmic stream is still a real person listening to your music. It just was found through, AI technology. So it's not exactly, it doesn't equate to, someone listening in their library, but it's still a real person listening to your music. And, it can perpetuate growth. So, the more followers you get, the more algorithmic playlists you get put on, the more streams you get, and then so on and so on and so on and so on. So that's how you would build that. I'd say looking at the data from TuneCore to Spotify, I mean, Spotify's backend is so robust at Spotify for Artists. So I'd say if you're going there, like, that's going to be like the meatiest set of data that you can get as far as the Spotify data. Get it straight from the source. What to keep in mind, though, is that data is trending data. So what you get in your TuneCore dashboard is going to be reported paid streams. So that's, stream counts that you're going to make money on. Not everything you see in your dashboard you're going to make money on for various reasons. It could be people streaming on free tiers. It could be people who've streamed, but the streams haven't been reported yet because they downloaded in their library and they're offline. And, there's a multitude of factors that could come into play. So I'd keep that in mind. When you're looking at your TuneCore data, that's going to be more directly tied to your money. But when you're looking at Spotify, that's trending data. That's going to be really helpful in real time.
For sure. And Charlotte, between TuneCore and Spotify, tell us a little bit about what you and your team have been able to glean from the data and analytics that have been offered to you on those fronts.
I mean, we're very fortunate to have that much data. Honestly, it's so helpful in so many ways. I think for us, especially as an artist, I mean, it is so beneficial to even be able to watch your growth with followers, with streams or anything, to even watch growth or to watch trends is so important. And that kind of technology can be the deciding factor on why you decide to release again quicker than you were going to, or decide to hold off on release to give this single a moment. You know what I mean? And those things are super important to pay attention to. And the other thing that's been really helpful to us is the territory, is what David was talking about, is we've, for example, for me, is we noticed that like Germany was being like, we had a lot of listeners in Germany, and like it's already getting big playlisting in Germany. And it actually led to like promoters and like labels or agents and all this stuff actually reaching out about like European and like German tours, which is like exactly what you were just talking about, which is so funny, but also so important for me to be able to also look at major cities and to be able to see what cities I'm being listened to and how many times and why, and be able to actually just be able to look at that and decide. The fact that artists can have information to, and not saying that you should go to a country and tour because you're like analytics, but also at the same time, it's so much more helpful than not having that information. And it can lead to so many future decisions for releases as well as touring and all of that. So it's so beneficial, and it's been the reason we've made so many decisions and are going to make so many decisions in the future for all of those reasons. So I'm so grateful for it.
That's awesome. And that's, you know, anyone who's been watching our webinars knows that that's like my favorite sort of TuneCore story or anecdote, just sort of being discovered in places you're like, what? So I have to ask you really quick, are there any like particular territories that you were just like, what, when you found out people were listening?
I mean, honestly, the Germany one was the coolest thing for me, just because my whole one side of my family is from Germany, and we have a lot of relatives there. So I've always in my head.
How many relatives? Yeah, but are these the people who are listening?
Yeah, they better be. But they, like, for me, I've always just like wanted to. That's always been one of the places like that I've been like that's just like the way that they enjoy music is just like so interesting to me, and like also just those shows just look insane. And I have a lot of friends who've been over there that just say nothing but good things, and same with a lot of Europe. So that's for me has been super exciting, because it's also a way to plan out, you know what I mean, your future, and at least have some hope and idea of that, instead of just like jumping in and going, let's go play a show in London. You know what I mean? You have facts to back it up, and you have information that you can at least use to have an idea of these regions to go to, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, again, just I feel like most people, when they start making music and they start having those tour dreams, there's always like a location that they have in mind. Yeah. It's cool they, you know, kind of get to keep an eye on that location now. And we're getting to a point where I want to start taking some questions that have been filtering in. Thank you to everyone in the chat who's been throwing questions in there. I'm sure we probably answered some of them, so I'll try not to repeat. But I also had one last question, which happens to be a question from the crowd, so it's very serendipitous. More recently, TuneCore has made Canvas available for artists. That's a feature that allows artists to upload looped videos. I guess I'll kick it back to David and just say, is there any advice that you have for artists to make the most of Canvas?
Yeah, I mean, I think Canvas is, I mean, first off, it's just an incredible way to show your personality as an artist, right? I mean, it plays into what we were saying about capturing people's attention after being exposed on a playlist. So I think that's number one. I think, you know, one misconception that I hear about Canvas that I maybe should just clear up. I think sometimes people who are thinking about doing a Canvas or not doing a Canvas for a track are wondering, well, what kind of advantage does this give me when I'm pitching to editorial? And I think that, you know, the key thing to remember with Canvas is that it was tested for a long time. It's you know, released more broadly now. It is a tool that directly impacts performance of tracks. It increases listening time. You know, the metrics all say that Canvas improves listener experience to the point where they will listen to your music more and for longer than if you do not have a Canvas on the track. I think that's the key thing to keep in mind. Our editors are making editorial decisions based on the music first and foremost, right? Obviously, you know, there's a certain degree of like things should look professional, right? Cover art we talked about, and assets and all of that. But you know, when you're talking about editorial, focus on the music. The reason to do Canvas is not because it will, you know, in some way curry favor with Spotify. The reason to do Canvas is that it actually improves your own streams and improves your own you know, listener session times and things like that. It actually benefits you directly because it's just a much richer experience, you know, to add that. You know, it's kind of cover art for the 21st century, right? It just fleshes out the experience tremendously.
Yeah, there's something kind of mesmerizing about it. And even just like, again, as someone who's been using Spotify for so long, I picked up my phone the other day and a band I love just, you know, dropped a new record. And I didn't take them to be the kind of artist that might throw something on there. And I thought about like, wait, this is a really visual band. What am I thinking? And I find myself just kind of like looking, like kind of in the zone, listening to this new song. So, you know, it's very true. So hopefully that helped answer someone's question. But I guess, Dan, have you been getting any questions from artists as we've unrolled Canvas? Is there anything you want to jump in there and mention?
Yeah, people have been, I guess, a little confused about where to do this. You go into Spotify for Artists, you click on your discography, you go to music, you click on the track, and then in the right-hand corner, there'll be a button that says Add Canvas. And it's as simple as that. You know, you can find the specs that you need for the video online. And keep in mind, it's a looping video. So you can get really creative with how it loops. Like it could be trippy. It could, you know, look like you're always walking down a hallway. Like if you want to do something fun like that, it's a looping video. So have fun.
Yeah, you don't need to be Martin Scorsese, right? You know, it's just. I don't want to go too far back into the playlist conversation because I'm sure we answered some questions for Jacob Wright in the chat, but I'll just, Jacob did have one sort of follow-up question and I don't know that we touched on this, and I don't know that I've really had to answer it before myself. Are there any sort of standards or regulations that artists need to know about when pitching on Spotify for Artists for a playlist?
I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by standards or regulation, but I think, you know, in general, in terms of my 2 cents on pitching, keeping in mind that I'm not an editor, I'm on the artist and label partnerships team,
Sure.
but I work very closely with all of those guys. You know, generally speaking, I think it helps when you're pitching to have a sense of the ecosystem that you're pitching into, right? So, you know, I think there's a general sense that, oh, you know, I'm gonna pitch this track, position it in one way, and kind of hope that all of the editors fall in line and just fall in love with it, and, you know, create a new playlist just for my track or something like that. Whereas I think it's really important to realize that, you know, editors all have certain playlists that they're responsible for. They're creating new playlists all the time, but they are really not in a position of trying to find. They're not, you know, their kind of MO is to find a track for all of their playlists rather than a playlist for every single track. So if you think about, you know, your pitch as in, okay, well, where am I pitching to? What are the playlists? What are the genres? What are the kind of musical ecosystems on Spotify that I'm seeing similar artists? And how are those artists positioning themselves on and off platform? And I would say that in your pitch, think about, okay, well, how, you know, I'm not suggesting that you create music just for a certain playlist, because you should always create music first and foremost that, you know, you think is good and that moves you and that is what you want to create. But in terms of the positioning of that music, when you're pitching it, you know, think about where you want it to end up. Think about how other artists that are ending up where you want to end up are positioning themselves, and try to position yourself the same way. So that's not really a regulation, but it's, I would say, in terms of best practices for actually doing the pitch process and where you're adding in the context in the context box, I would think about it that way.
Well, you don't know it, but you actually also just answered Anthony Virgo's question, which was basically just looking for some more tips about how independent artists can get on curated playlists, which I think we covered, but I think a lot of what you just spoke on really helps.
The biggest thing you can do as an artist, honestly, is I think that a lot of emphasis is put on the outward, you know, what you're putting out into the world in terms of pitches, or obviously it's a grind and it's a hustle to try to get your music out there to on Spotify or just in the world in general. And I think that the big thing that is missed sometimes, that I would say is probably the most important, is the absorption of knowledge and the research and figuring out, well, what is this landscape, right? Like Spotify is a big landscape, but it is a landscape, and there are certain nooks and crannies that it helps to understand if you're making music in a particular subgenre that might not be immediately apparent that there's a huge space for it on Spotify. Go digging around a little bit, and you'll see that there probably is a space for it. You'll see what kinds of artists are there. You'll see what they're doing to kind of make themselves distinct.
I think that's such a good point. It's not asimilar in a lot of ways, like I mentioned earlier, to doing your press, your PR research, right? Like, don't be pitching to the wrong outlets that don't cover your genre. And while you're at it, spend some time and figure out what those new outlets are. Like, do some digging. Go a few pages in on those Google searches. I had a quick question for that I think, because we had been talking about it actually in previous conversations, about this concept of turning listeners into followers, right? There are these vagaries around, what's a listener, what's a follower? Are they listening to me on Spotify and then following me on, Instagram or TikTok? And Charlotte, you talked a little bit about sort of that, the transitions from social platforms to streaming platforms. And for Valley Valentina, again, if you have any advice as to how to turn listeners into followers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that mainly it has a lot to do with the music. I think that when people go to your page and they like one song or they find one song, they're going to listen to the next one. And if it should be hopefully somewhat consistent of your brand or your style, to the point where if they are brought by that playlist, or if they hear one song, that they will most likely be a fan of the same genre, the other songs that you have. So I think that's important. I also think that, setting up your profile on Spotify so that it really represents who you are, and that it looks like you put time into it, and it looks like it makes it an artist or in a project that they want to follow and that they want to invest their time in. And I think that like all around content is super important, and having a bio, what you were talking about before, and like having your story and being able to, so that they can relate to something more than just that one song, and giving them more things. You're just trying to grab their attention, I think, as much as possible for as long as possible, which is also why the Canvas thing is so great. But it's just trying to hold that as long as possible. And luckily there are so many ways to do that on Spotify, that you can add pictures and have a bio, and you can do all these things that will just kind of grab their attention. And I think to take advantage of those as much as possible is the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, we're in 2020. We're in a constant battle for people's attention spans, no matter what. I think that's really good. And Dan, I actually, sort of building on that, and Charlotte started to talk about it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Nehemiah Hustle asked, how often should they be updating their Spotify for Artists page?
Oh, well, Charlotte was right. Yeah, your Spotify for Artists page, your profile is it's a landing page for your music on Spotify. So make it count. I'd update it every single time I have a new release. You maybe don't need to rewrite your bio, but then again, it doesn't have to be a Wikipedia bio. But get creative. You could, if you have a hotline for fans, you can put a phone number in there. If you have, some other way for fans to reach you, let them know. Like, that's where you want to put Like, don't just put like XOXO. Like, take the opportunity to say something and really lean into that. So I'd say
people want to be able to find you.
Yeah. And honestly, like, if you're an artist, you're going to photo shoots, you're making stuff, you're collaborating with people, you're probably not going to be short on a new like a new picture, new artwork. Odds are the artists that I work with have too much. So like, I'd say like load up, like really take the opportunity. If you have new press photos, put them in there. And then another thing I'd say, in my experience, when driving listeners to fans, like, think about it as far as like, if you don't have a lot of money, you don't need a lot of money to run a ad campaign on Instagram, for example. If that's all you have the budget for,
someone else's questions.
do it. Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Elliot
Let's go
Wild
there.
asked, do you have any using Spotify to promote your artist profile? This is amazing.
Amazing. So yeah, so I'd say this goes right into what Charlotte was saying too, because think about it this way: if you advertise a song, that's not a bad idea, right? You put a new song out, you want to run an ad to it, but the shelf life for doing that might be the first day or two after you do that. Eventually, a more sustainable campaign would look like running an ad to your artist profile itself, because the reason is the follow button is on the artist profile. It's not on an artist, like it's not on the song page. If you go to a specific song, the follow button's not on there. So, there's links to playlists, there's the whole catalog there. I'd say that's how you really lean into building followers and not just listens, not just streams. I'd say that's going to be a sustainable model to really get you where you want to go, even on a small budget.
I love it. And David, do you have anything to add in terms of, I know this could probably be its own webinar live session all in and of itself, but anything to build on from what Dan said in terms of just efficiently using Spotify ads? And actually, Elliot Wild in the chat did mention artist profile, so they were on the same page as us.
I mean, definitely. I think obviously there are a lot of ways to run ads on various social media platforms leading to Spotify. Spotify also has Ad Studio, which is just a really easy to use tool that is designed for low spend ads on Spotify. So you're tapping into some of the same inventory that large brands are using on the platform to advertise, I don't know, Coca-Cola or whatever on the free version. You're actually able to tap into all of that tech and use that to advertise your music. And if the audience is already primarily on Spotify, your audience is an audience that is constantly listening to music and artists that might sound similar to you or have a similar story to yours. Then why not target them where they are on Spotify? Because rather than having to click through an ad on another platform and have several clicks to get to your music, it's one click. Right. So I would say definitely make use of that. We have there's a great support team attached to Ad Studio as well that can answer questions you have, but it's a great tool.
That's awesome. And someone also asked, I think we kind of covered this, but I'll re-clarify. Someone asked, how can an artist know if a playlist promoter is legit? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think really the rule of thumb here is if anyone's guaranteeing you placement, guaranteeing you streams, guaranteeing you anything for money, run in the opposite direction. Do your research is my personal advice. I've spoken to folks at totally great promotional firms and artist services firms that this is just one of the things they do because they have relationships but these are not the people that are going to be saying guaranteed XYZ streams. Those are the people who are going to treat your project like a proper publicist or promoter would.
Yeah, if it sounds too good to be true, it always is. I mean, that works for almost everything in life, including playlist promotion. I think if someone's guaranteeing you placement, there's a good chance that there's actually some fraud going on there, fraudulent, which is dangerous. I think if they are just being super hyperbolic and saying, oh, we have relationships with everybody and we're gonna maybe not guaranteeing, but we're gonna get you on all these playlists and you're gonna be the next biggest thing since sliced bread. Take that with a grain of salt too. I think that generally, I've spoken with a lot of different, people in the industry, people that work with artists, people that work with labels, and the ones that I've always found are the best and easiest to work with are the ones that approach everything less hyperbolically, a little bit more, level, and maybe that's also just my own personality type. But
I think those are reality, right?
Exactly. I'd much rather have a promoter come to me and say, hey, look, man, I don't know if I can make this happen, but I'm really in love with your music, and I want to work really hard to try to make something out of it. Like that means so much more than someone saying, oh, we're gonna go straight to the top. Like that kind of you just picture someone with a cigar when they say that, right? It's like I'm always skeptical of that mentality.
And Charlotte, have you had to deal with that sort of thing, sussing that sort of thing out, in terms of working with organizations like that?
I mean, yeah, I think I completely agree that it's like the guarantee, even if I get a major playlist, there's still no guarantee of what the actual like listens or streams will be from that. Like it will obviously be larger than a smaller playlist, or if I didn't get it, but there's still no number. It's not like I get playlisted and then they're like, Spotify says we guarantee you this many, and it's, you just hope for the best and you hope that it translates and that it correlates and transfers over to the rest of your catalog. But I agree that if anybody's guaranteeing you anything, that it's just not, it's just not. Yeah, it's just not it. Run the other way. It's just not true. Because even through I never even know. I could be the cover of a major playlist, and you just hope that it works well, and you hope that people like the cover art, and you hope that they like the song and they don't just skip over it, and that it actually translates well to the audience. But there's no guarantee for any of it. It's just you make the best music you can and go through the motions of it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, placement is everything, but listener behavior is listener behavior. And I think we've covered a lot of that today in terms of just setting your expectations and focusing elsewhere, focusing your energy on what else you can take advantage of with Spotify and Spotify for Artists. So we are at the top of the hour. I want to just say thanks. We managed to answer actually like a lot of the questions today, so I'm pretty psyched about that. I just want to say thanks to everyone again. TuneCore Zone, Daniel Iammatteo, Spotify Zone, David Ecker, and Charlotte Sands, TuneCore Artist, brand new single, Dress. Go check it out. We got it on the TuneCore New Music Friday playlist. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, and shout out to Charlotte's sweatshirt.
Oh yeah, wait, let's see that merch.
Let's see the merch, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Awesome.
She accidentally wore her own merch on the
accidentally.
Talk about how important Merch Game was. Merch Game is so important.
Exactly.
We'll do a new panel for that.
Yeah. Thanks for plug, people. And to everyone else watching out there, hopefully you got some great gems from these people. They're fantastic resources. But, we're going to send out a recap with this, and we'll have it up on the blog for you to watch this if you tuned in a little bit late. Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to the guests. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll see you guys in 2021.
All right.
See you guys.